Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the GioMoShow, your home for all Golden Grizzlies basketball. My name is Giovanni Moceri. I am your host. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to help support the show and to, well, now follow the rest of the Horizon League tournament because, unfortunately, neither men's or women's basketball for the Golden Grizzlies will be in Indianapolis competing for a championship. So this kind of closes the page on the Golden Grizzlies content. But we got tons of Horizon League tournament stuff coming up in the coming week. I'll be in Indianapolis covering it boots on the ground style. So it's got a ton of good stuff coming out. So be sure to follow and not miss one bit of it. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, all your audio platforms. Follow the GioMo Show on Instagram at the GioMo Show. And you can follow me on Twitter as well at GioMoSherry, WXOU. All of that is listed below or on screen if you're watching on YouTube. So as I mentioned before, this is the final episode of this season that will cover the Golden Grizzlies in playing action. And it was a very depressing day on Wednesday. This is coming out a little bit late because we had some Wi-Fi trouble in the house, and preparations for Indy kind of took up some of the evenings. But this might be coming out a little bit late for you guys. Reopening potentially partially healed wound. But I can't not have anything for it. I mean, I was there, and it's a story worth telling, honestly. And we'll get to the game itself. Unfortunately, I won't be covering the women's side of things, but overtime loss to Cleveland State. Mackenzie's back at it again, 39 points, just finishing off a fantastic freshman season for her. Some of the best that the women's team has seen in program history. But we'll stick with the men's side because that's where we've been covering for this season. Their Wednesday game against Northern Kentucky ends in a heartbreaking loss, 85-84, as the 7-seed Norse move on as the only road team in the first round to move on. And they're deserving of such. I mean, 7-seed is kind of misleading for Northern Kentucky anyway, just because they've kind of suffered injuries similar to the likes of Oakland did mid-season, but they were still able to get healthy when it came to tournament time, also just like Oakland was, but Northern Kentucky got the best of Oakland. And honestly, for the matchup itself, before I get into a bit of a detailed breakdown of the game and kind of what the Golden Grizzlies are looking into for the offseason, Campy's comments at the post game, I'll mention that as well. But first, I want to kind of get to how we ended up facing Northern Kentucky, how Oakland became the 4 seed, and kind of how we kind of screwed ourselves to get the toughest matchup in the first round. By far the toughest matchup in that first round. Because you compare it to Wright State and Cleveland State. I mean, Wright State's on the 1 seed, Cleveland State was a 10. I mean, that they're moving on like they should. You get 2 seed Robert Morris facing what would that be, 9 seed Youngstown State. Youngstown struggled all season. They're talented, but that kind of nearby rivalry has been the Colonials' way for quite some time now. Detroit and Milwaukee. Milwaukee lost their top scorer right before the game. Like a day before the game, season-ending injury. And so, yeah, Detroit's going to win in Callahan and move on to the semifinals. But then you leave Oakland as the 4 seed against the Northern Kentucky 7 seed. Then that absolutely was the toughest matchup. Northern Kentucky was the toughest away team in that first round. But the way Oakland got there was, and remember that last game against Detroit. Can you imagine if Oakland won? So if Oakland were to win that game, then Oakland would have been the 3rd seed, since with Robert Morris winning, they locked up the 2nd seed. Oakland would have been the 3rd seed and would have been able to face that injured Milwaukee team. Guarantee moving on to the semifinals. And that's in that way, the same way Detroit Mercy did. And we lost that home game. We lost that game on senior day. Orlando Lovejoy, TJ Nadeau, those guys burned the place down. And that stuck Oakland with Northern Kentucky because, kind of a reflection of some of the other home games that they have struggled with throughout this season, where they got behind early and they just could not put possessions back to back to be able to cut back into it, to get a lead, to get a substantial lead, one that can be held on to for the rest of the game. Not just a long run to lead to a 3-point lead and then all for it to come right back just because all it takes is the other team to make one shot and your run is killed. It happened with Green Bay. It happened with Detroit. And now in this game, it happened against Northern Kentucky. And in numerous games this season, it was the same script of how Oakland, had their season ended. It's how they got them into that game against Northern Kentucky, and it's how it ended their season against Northern Kentucky. And I say this out of frustration because it is a known script, and it's something that, it's not something that Oakland intentionally falls into, but like patterns are patterns for a reason. It's because it's not something that's been, if you were to ask Campy, he would say that it's on him and that he didn't emphasize it enough, and he takes a lot of the brunt of the blame for it. And obviously, I'll agree with that a little bit, but it's so frustrating to see the season end in such a bad pattern down that stretch in February where Oakland lost 6 of their last 8 games going into the tournament. Yes, they were 2-6 down the stretch going into the tournament, and obviously now that makes them finish 2-7, losing 7 of their last 9 games. Like Campy says, it was a fall, it was a collapse, the likes of which Oakland has not seen before, especially with the home losses too. That's something where, the crowd was there like he demanded early in the season against, after the Purdue Fort Wayne game that was on a Wednesday when the heat was out and campus was pretty much closed. Those comments are something that I thought about all season long, where I didn't disagree with the comments. I mean, obviously, for me, when it comes to the student section, I've had my frustrations with it when I was a student and there was empty stands and I was by myself when, and kind of throughout, I've always envied those who were at Oakland before COVID and got to experience the full strength of the Grizz gang. So, I mean, obviously, at the time I agreed with those comments, and this season they were able to prove Campy wrong, but unfortunately, the team on the court did not put up their end of the bargain. And I could tell Campy was frustrated with that. I obviously, in some of those home losses, he did feel regretful. He did, you could tell he wanted to take those words back. And, maybe he didn't intend for them to cause as much harm as they did or as much noise as they did. But you could tell he was kind of reeling from that. And, I can't say I blame him for saying it. I can't blame him for feeling it either. Because that was a very strange twist to this season, where Oakland started 10-3, top of the league, tied with Wright State, and then just couldn't keep it up throughout the rest. All of that to say, that's how we ended up with the matchup against Northern Kentucky. So now let's get into the game itself, and I'll get to some more of the season implications. I wanted to cover them last, but they kind of end up coming out of my mouth at the start of the show. But I want to get to the kind of overall game itself. So it's the Wednesday first round of the Horizon League tournament. Oakland is hosting the Norse. And throughout the season and kind of throughout recent history between Oakland and Northern Kentucky, and this was kind of true of the 2 games that they played this season, it's usually a close game. It's almost always a close game. New rule on the broadcast says every time, like, hey, can we just start the clock at 2 minutes and then play? Because that's pretty much what we end up playing through all 38 minutes just to get to a close game with 2 minutes left. Let's save some time. And let's just play that 2-minute stretch. Obviously. So you knew it was going to be a close game. And it absolutely was. Oakland would keep things close in the beginning. Like it would, it wasn't the highest scoring affair, unlike what the final score would indicate. But Oakland was keeping it close throughout, but you could kind of see slowly but surely a mistake here, not finding the the right spot on defense. Just a couple of mistakes down the stretch of the first half. Northern Kentucky was starting to gain a little bit of control of it, but it was only by a possession, within 2 possessions. Not by much. A couple of plays by Oakland could flip the game and put them right back in the driver's seat. But the way the momentum was going, you felt like Northern Kentucky was starting to get it. And then right before halftime, what I believe the stretch that cost Oakland their season was the 8-0 run that Northern Kentucky had right before halftime that left Oakland on a 2+ minute scoring drought that ended up the halftime score 37-31. And right at halftime, I recorded something and I posted it to the GioMoShow Instagram story, and I believe I tweeted it as well. I knew right away that that could be what cost him this season, and I think I was pretty spot on it. Let's play the video. Now, Oakland did score the first basket of the second half, but otherwise, Oakland just kind of continued to struggle the same way. The zone that Northern Kentucky had, the defense that they were playing, you could definitely see it slowly but surely start to take hold and make Oakland uncomfortable, like in a lot of the games that they've lost, where you can just see the offense, like it's not flowing the way we're used to. It seems difficult. There's indecision. They're trying to find out what to do on the fly. And it's not something that we saw kind of earlier in the season where Oakland was the one who took control on offense, where Oakland was the aggressor. Otherwise, I feel like in the past month and a half, it's been Oakland reacting to what's been happening to them. That's a total flip of the role, especially when you're playing from behind. You feel that way too. And that's just kind of how the second half kind of continued, where in the middle of that, Oakland would go on another scoring drought, this one up to 4 minutes long. And, Oakland, at some point, they did have them making it a 2-point game, but just kind of still continued to struggle. And there was a key stretch during the second half where I'm looking around, I'm like, where is Baru? We haven't seen him on the court in a while. Did something happen? Did he get hurt? Turns out he was trying to get subbed in, but there was just such a long stretch of play without a break that they kept him off the court. And I don't know whether that was something that was intentional. It's something I kind of wish I asked at the post-game press conference. Asked Coach Horn that, but it didn't end up happening. But I felt like that stretch without Baru was huge because Oakland was really struggling. And as soon as he got subbed in, he was making an immediate impact, a rebound, a score. I mean, like Baru was there, not a second too soon. He was there just in time. But throughout the whole game, you saw Brody Robinson finding the deep shot. I mean, man, he was on fire from three. We'll get to it later on in the show, but Brody's three-point shooting really kept Oakland alive in this one, even though later on, Northern Kentucky would go on a 12-2 run to get up to a 13-point lead with about 4 minutes to go. I mean, throughout all the effort, whatever Oakland was doing, it just was not working. The offense would just come to a screeching halt. And you would get turnovers. Brody Robinson with 6 turnovers, not helping. And even then, Oakland only had 9 throughout the rest of the game. But Northern Kentucky, they had 8. So no one was really turning over the ball a ton. But, and it's such a tight game, those are costly. Those are very costly. And you just feel like any mistake that Oakland made as they're trying to, walk across a tightrope to be able to get back into this game, any mistake they made just put them so much farther back. And I kind of felt like it happened throughout the game. So now we're at the final media timeout. We're at 3 minutes and 22 seconds. Northern Kentucky leads it by 11, 68-57. Oakland down. But this is where the magic happens. This is where a crowd that was hype in certain sections but didn't necessarily had a ton to cheer for, as kind of the looming threat of their season ending started to kind of come over the crowd. That's where the craziness started happening. At around 3-ish minutes, whether it was right after the timeout or not, I can't remember, but right around that 3-minute mark, Oakland's playing the foul game. They're down by 11, and they're playing the foul game. And I think they even got down by, maybe there was another basket score that got them down by 13. But you're still down 10 plus, and you're starting to foul. And Northern Kentucky's missing free throws. And Brody's starting to make threes. Again, still. Passes his season high of 5, gets his 6th, and then his 7th, and then his 8th. Northern Kentucky is still missing their free throws. LJ Wells was at the line. He was 2 of 8 from the free throw line during this stretch. Everybody during that stretch was missing for Northern Kentucky. They were 15 of 26 from the line during the last 3 minutes of game. That's 57%. It's starting to work. Oakland's whittling it down. Down 9, down 7, down 6, holy crap, this is actually working in the most excruciating style of college basketball. Northern Kentucky is begging to lose. They keep missing and they keep missing. And it's just not enough. On Oakland's trip across the tightrope, they slipped up. Instead of sending players like LJ Wells to the line, they sent the best free throw shooter in the league, Cale Robinson. You could tell right away that was probably what really cost Oakland this miraculous comeback. Because Cale Robinson gets fouled, and you hear on the desk, boom! Not him! Campy was furious that they would foul Cale Robinson in a situation like that when the game and the momentum is going all their way. And he makes both of them. And that gives Northern Kentucky just enough air to continue to breathe and to eventually come away with the win. Despite what Oakland was doing, despite Brody Robinson making 10 three-pointers in the game to tie a Horizon League tournament record, despite crazy plays that got Baru to the line, Baru making both his free throws, even though he's at times struggled from the free throw line too, and also gets an inbound from Coy Thurman to take a split second off the clock right away in front of the basket. Coy tosses it up, tomahawk dunk for Baru during that stretch to kind of keep them close in this game. Despite all the momentum in Oakland's corner, that kind of one little mistake. You cannot make a mistake if you need a 11-point comeback in a free throw game in a tournament like that. But it was just too much, and they could not achieve the perfection required. And a last-second basket by Brody Robinson with the final seconds, just for pride's sake, he would toss it in to make it the 1-point game that is in the history books forever, 85-84. Northern Kentucky moves on to play in the second round game against Green Bay Sunday at Corteva Coliseum. That was rough. That is a rough way to go out. You really felt that Oakland was going to make a comeback in that one. You had every reason to believe it. I couldn't believe, I was so shocked. Because if Northern Kentucky was making their free throws, at least at the beginning of this stretch, didn't matter. Then none of this is exciting. All of it is just garbage time in the most excruciating 3.5 minutes of basketball you have seen. If they were making their free throws. But that strategy, in college basketball at least, has merit because of free throw shooting like that. Some guys in college are just awful from the line. And that's the way they take advantage of it. It gave Oakland a chance. It gave everybody hope. I mean, in the most painful of ways, it gave Oakland hope, but it just wasn't enough. That building, listen, I always talk about the arena and how loud it gets, and pretty much every home game I have an opportunity to when a timeout is called by the opposing team because Oakland's making their run to tie the game, and they're doing that routine. There's always a time where the arena is just like you hear your ears are vibrating for a bit of a peak stretch of noise in that place. It gets very loud. I mean, maybe it was because of where I was sitting. Maybe it was because of the acoustics, because we were at a different side. Let's say we're on the left side of the Bear logo. We're on the north end of the courts near the student section. But I truly felt that arena was the loudest it was all season during that final 3 minutes of Oakland's desperate attempt to get back into this one and to save their season. So I got to give huge credit to everybody in attendance that night. That truly felt like March Madness. It is March Madness. It is the Horizon League tournament. It's the first conference tournament that plays in March. That was March Madness. And it would have been even more madness if Oakland was actually able to come back behind a 36-point performance by Brody Robinson. Gave it everything he had left. He was 12 of 26 from the field. He was 10 of 20 from three. As I mentioned, it ties a Horizon League tournament record in three-pointers made. And along with 7 rebounds, 3 assists, An unfortunate 6 turnovers, but 2 steals in 37-33 played. This was Brody Robinson's, magnum opus. This was, you can't ask more of him. There were opportunities. He tried to split a double team and launch a 3 and try to draw the foul while doing it. He didn't make it, but it would have put him, I think that one would have been his 11th three-pointer made, which would have broken the record, and it would have broken the tournament record, and it also would have tied Brody Robinson at an Oakland three-point shooting record. That Golke almost got it too in a game against IU Indy 2 years ago. He ended the game with just 10, but still, Brody now joins the likes of Jack Golke in Oakland history as far as 3 points made in a game. Can't ask more of him. Cannot. And you look down as well. It's been a rough couple of games for Zaire Wells. He was 1 of 8. Last game, I think he had a poor shooting night as well. The last game against Detroit, having him making those shots would have been so crucial. You look at Baru, 12 and 8, 4 assists. Made both his free throws in critical time. With I think less than a minute left, sunk both of them. He goes out with a bang as a Golden Grizzly. Isaac Garrett, 14 and 6. 4 offensive rebounds. He was crucial in the beginning of the game, grabbing offensive rebounds to keep Oakland afloat during those first opening minutes. But of course, Isaac Garrett fouls out. That happens, it feels like, whenever we need him most. He's always missing for the past few minutes. That's really frustrating. I don't have the exact numbers on it, but I think it's at least 4 games that he's fouled out in. And those ended up being close games where you could have used a potential Horizon League Player of the Year, injury aside. That one was frustrating as well. Mike Hogue, 8 and 6 and 3 assists. Was 4 of 9 from the floor, 3 offensive rebounds for him. Oakland 15 total offensive rebounds, 43-40 rebounding advantage Oakland. But I'm not going to go through the stats in comparison. I'll stop there. Pretty much a lot of it was pretty even between the two teams, and obviously the game and the score would indicate that as such. But it's such a heartbreaker. It's such a heartbreaker. And now I'll get to the press conference side of things, because luckily in tournament games we have both the opposing team come in and give their press conference, give us an opportunity to ask them questions. And kind of the notes from head coach Darren Horn, Donovan O'Day, and LJ Wells were there. A big focus was on LJ Wells, obviously deserving of so. In the game they played at Northern Kentucky, he didn't play the one in the arena, along with Isaac Garrett. Both of them were missing from that game that Oakland won in the arena. But down in Highland Heights, it was an 18-point double-double for LJ Wells. He was nuts. In this game, in the Horizon League tournament, in his senior season, him as one of the very few Division I players to stay at the same university for 4 years, another 18-point double-double. 18 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, 2 blocks, 7 of 11 from the floor, but was crucial in Oakland's comeback. He was only 4 of 10 from the free throw line. But a lot of the press conference was focused on him staying, what he means to the team. Griffin Beers asked a question about kind of like what LJ means to Northern Kentucky, and Darren Horn's response was, "Are you trying to get me to cry?" I got a huge respect for Horn and that program. They are one of the most successful programs in recent history in the Horizon League. They won the championship in LJ's freshman season. That was also a big part of his storyline, and him being able to stick through it is something that I at least really admire. And I admire Baru for the same reason. Trey Townsend, Chris Conway, even though they transferred in their last season, they still stayed with the program. Blake Lampman, he has to be mentioned as far as Oakland players that have stayed at the university. But pretty much, I don't care where you are, if you stay, that shows huge respect to the program, to your fans, to your university, to your own education, because then you're able to, absolutely finish your degree and then some. So for Wells, I got huge respect for that guy, man. So not so much other than that from the NKU side of the press conference. But now I want to get to the Oakland press conference, where it was Campy, it was Baru, and it was Brody that were in attendance for questions. It was kind of tough. It was kind of tough with the Detroit game. Had a similar feeling, losing on senior night, but you knew they were going to be back. You knew they were going to be back. We would talk to them again. This one, I don't. Those are rough. Those season-ending press conferences are so rough, especially with the kind of guys that Oakland usually has. They usually have really good guys as far as like people. They're not just athletes; they're people too. But that was an especially depressing press conference to have. You had Baru and you had Brody in tears, sniffling, walking in. It's like, God, it's you almost don't even want to ask him a question. It's like on a human side, like you kind of just want to make him feel better. You want to say, "Oh, it's okay. We still love you guys." Like you want to say that, but it's not appropriate in a press conference. Okay, this isn't the Jaguars. This isn't the Jacksonville Jaguars. Post game press conference. You got to show a little bit of backbone. You got to be a professional about it. But still, I mean, your heart bleeds for those guys. And Campy kind of, went over things. I mean, obviously, with the players, there was the, like, Baru, what does Oakland mean to you? That final stretch. I mean, the typical questions. I really recommend you guys go and watch that press conference. But when the players left and we got to talk to just Campy, he started to talk about how, like I mentioned at the top of the show, it was one of the worst stretches, one of the worst finishes to a season Oakland has had. One of the worst home performances this season that they have had. It's not something that happens often at Oakland, but it happened to happen this season. Neil Rule asked when the season turned, because like I mentioned, top of the league, 10-3. Down to fourth place and out in the first round after all that. So Neil Rule asked when the season changed. And it's pretty much an agreement. I'm in agreement with it as well. It's when Isaac Garrett got hurt. Even when he came back, even when he was fully healthy, for whatever reason, Oakland could not find that same groove. They were absolutely not the same team. They won a couple of games without him. When he came back, that first one against Robert Morris, he was 1 of 11. He was dreadful. I mean, it's a tough thing to come back from. And, with the ankle injury he had, but even with him back, it wasn't the same. Everything looked difficult. Everything looked like how it did against Northern Kentucky, against Detroit, against Green Bay. All these games to end the season, those games always come to mind just because they're more recent. Obviously, there was other ones like that, but it looked difficult, hesitant, not enforcing, not being the aggressor. I don't know what it was, but it definitely wasn't the same. And I'm sure if you were to look at the stats of the offensive output and obviously the wins and losses, I would imagine the stats would reflect that. So that was covered as well. Campy was also very appreciative of the fans still showing up, and he did the same at the Detroit game. Still very appreciative of everybody showing up despite his comments and despite them losing at home. The place was still full, and so I always like to bring that up as well, just because of how important I know the home atmosphere is in the arena. So that was mentioned as well. But the crown jewel, the one you really take away from, is at the very end, when Campy was asked about how this season shapes the program going forward. Very open-ended kind of question, but I thought it was the perfect one to end the press conference with, because this is the last time we're going to talk to Campy like this until next season. So I thought that was a perfect question to end it on. And him saying, he said this. This was the first year that Oakland really dove into NIL, into paying players, into kind of playing the new way of college basketball. And he termed it as roster construction. I haven't heard him talk in those terms before, but this season, Campy said, will shape roster construction moving forward, because they've dove into it, because they've played players. They're now going to evaluate how they spend their money. What kind of players do they get? Do they do the thing they did to beat Kentucky? Get old and stay old. That's something he was saying all throughout the March Madness press conferences. Get old and stay old. But he takes a look at Wright State and he sees a bunch of freshmen, sophomores, young guys on that team, in addition to some transfers and some veterans that have stayed. But is get old and stay old still the way you play? Does it have to be the way you play? Do you have to get 7 one-year guys at the end of their career? Or can you take a swing on some freshmen? Can you play it kind of a different way, the way Wright State did? Because obviously any champion, regular season champions included, you're going to take a look at what they did and see if you can modify the way you do things. So Campy is going to evaluate very closely on how they construct the roster. And I'm curious what that's going to end up looking like moving forward. I don't know if Isaac Garrett's coming back. We miss Nassim, but I wonder if Nassim is going to stay. His brother's on the team too. I got to imagine that's kind of some insurance policy to keep him at Oakland, because he was just such a key missing piece throughout the rest of the season. That was also mentioned in the press conference. The absence of Nassim Mashore and kind of taking away the three-point shooting that Oakland had in their arsenal. I think the season would have been way different with him. But, I thought that was a great note to go out on. And it's one I'll go out on as well. As far as this show has been a bit of a longer one, but we'll dive deeper into kind of, we'll stay in touch with the offseason if we get a collection of some big signs. Obviously, Deuce Hamilton being committed to Oakland, that's something we're going to keep an eye on more, whether for basketball reasons or for just cool that Rip's going to be in the building again kind of reasons. But throughout the offseason, very sporadically, very infrequent, we'll be covering things during the offseason. Still was a great season to cover. It was my first season covering it kind of like as a full-time adult with a full-time job, covering this during nights and weekends and covering other sports as well, juggling a lot during the season. This was a great season for me and for the show. We're at 121 subscribers, I think. It's at 320 something followers on the Instagram page. I'm at 400 on Twitter. This was a huge season for me, and this is kind of like my season end thank you on the Golden Grizzlies side of things. Obviously, we got Horizon League content coming up as well, but I just want to thank everybody. Thank the athletic department. Thank everybody who's kind of made my experience covering the Golden Grizzlies very smooth, very little friction, and a great amount of cooperation. It does not go unappreciated, even for former radio sports media director of the university. Not big time, not national, but I still appreciate them taking some interest in me and giving me access to the team like they do for others. So I'm going on for a while. I'm losing my vocal stamina, but I still appreciate everybody following the Golden Grizzlies this season. We got a couple episodes coming out soon regarding the Horizon League tournament. The Instagram's going to be on fire. Be sure to follow that at the GioMoShow. I'll be posting videos here as well, not so much in the podcast format, but game recaps, game previews of the Horizon League tournament. I'm going to be all over it. So you guys got a lot coming your way, even without the Golden Grizzlies. Let's try to make a name for ourselves on the Horizon League side of things, huh? That's what we're doing in Indy. So thank you everybody for watching. Rate, review, subscribe, follow on Instagram, and we'll see you at the tournament.